Hello and welcome to the TT Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to one person from the world of the TT about their lives, their journeys, and their relationship with the greatest motorsporting event in the world. Steve, we need to get out our orange novice bibs for today's guest.
Yes, sir.
Can you remember wearing one of them?
Do you know what? Very, very clearly.
Can you?
Yeah, no, really, I can. Yeah, it's more the nerves and just the mindset and just not knowing really what to expect.
Well, I don't know what we're going to expect from this guest. Shall we get him on?
Let's get him out.
Milo, I don't even know. We were just talking prior to the podcast starting. I normally give people these big intros with loads of stats, all the years of racing. I mean, 3 TT starts, 3 TT finishes.
It's a good going, isn't it? 100%
it's
at the moment.
It's a great start, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
So there's going to be a lot of people listening to it that probably know and have heard of the name, but don't know a great deal about you. And I guess for the next half an hour, we're going to find out all about Milo Ward.
Oh, let's not go too far.
Before we get into like the racing, the racing at the start, as a big fan of the TT podcast,
Big, massive fan.
yeah, favorite episode?
Either Molly's or maybe Hutchie's. They were both fantastic. Hutchie's was through his, all his injuries and coming back to it all. And then Molly's, I just love Molly. He's just an absolute
great.
legend.
Absolutely. Anyway, we start every podcast.
Sorry, Steve. I loved yours as well.
When did I? Anyway, we start the podcast asking the same question to all the riders. And for you, it's quite poignant because it only happened a few months ago. That tap on the shoulder. Let's talk about the actual first race specifically. You're rolling up through no man's land. What are the feelings? What are the sensations? What are you thinking about rolling up and getting that tap?
Sort of going, as we were on the grid, that's when the nerves really hit me, as we were sort of, making your way up. The moment I actually sort of went into to no man's land and then into where the hand was on my shoulder, I sort of felt strangely relaxed. I'd put all this effort into getting to this point, like all the learning and all the other years of racing, thinking TT's where I want to be. Hand went on my shoulder and I was like, I'm about to go and do my TT race. I'm going to be officially, the whole week before I was a TT potential racer. Before that it was I'm going to go to the TT. Before that it was always a dream to go to the TT. Hand was on my shoulder, I was like, the moment this clutch goes, I'm a TT racer.
Yeah.
Hopefully a TT finisher in 6 laps time at the end of the superbike, but I'm going to be one. But then it's always the fact of, I then got St Ninians and then Bray Hill.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's get through that bit, get past Court Bridge, and then we're on for a winner now. We can go. So it was shit myself, relax, sort of like a dead state. I couldn't really explain it other than sort of
the zone.
Yeah, just there.
And did that all kick off from the moment you opened your eyes on your first race morning?
Yeah, that whole morning I was probably a bit angrier than I should have been.
Apprehensive.
Yeah, exactly. The nerves were kicking. I was like, about to go and do it, but the guys I were with, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't have been a better bunch of people to go and do my first TT with.
Yeah.
The whole team were amazing.
What we don't talk about a lot, and I guess it's because of the guests we've had on, a lot of them are starting in the first 10 riders, so they haven't got a long time to wait for the first. You hear that first rider go down the road, but potentially you're way at the back, and it takes a while to get to the back, and once you're there, there's riders still with tyre warmers on, there's still riders not even put their helmets on before they've even...
Oh, they were heading off down Bray Hill, and I was still going like my probably 2 toilet trips to go before I was getting on the bike, because I was going backwards and forwards to that little quarter lap cabin that we had, backwards and forwards. But yeah, they're heading off down, and you're like, but you all got to start off somewhere to get further to the front, so you just sort of wait, and then it's there, and then all of a sudden...
I wonder if that makes it worse, though, because you can hear the bikes and you know what's coming. It's like...
I'll be honest with you, it just built the excitement.
Yeah.
It's like, it's me in a minute.
on that build-up, and especially running to no man's land, what's the thought process? What are you trying to focus on, particularly? Because obviously everything's new. I know you've done laps around there in practice, and you've had some fabulous advice from various people. But what's going through your mind, really, for your first ever race?
My bit was always just get through Bray Hill, keep her steady till we get to sort of Union Mills and on the run up to Balagary, and then once we were up to that point, I knew the track. I'd done the research. Milky and Barty and everyone had taught me through it. I'd done a lap with Cam Donald. So I knew the track, but it was like I need to settle in, try and keep the heart rate down because as you set off, my heart rate was skyrocketed all the way through Quarter Bridge. I could feel it beating in my throat, like need to calm this down. So it wasn't until you sort of get out of Union Mills and you got that like sort of straight run up, could control the breathing, relax into the bike, and think right, Balagary next. Through there, it starts to go a little sideways. You start to get a bit moving, and then I felt relaxed on it, and I was like, right, I'm happy now. And then it was just the key points of, right, Crosby, get over to the right, stay over there, and just things like that where you can just hear Milky shouting at you what you need to do as you're going along. And that was in. I was settled. Once that first lap was done, I was like, right, here we go now.
You're
5 more
it.
laps to enjoy this, and you just sort of relax, settle in. That hour and 40-50 minutes it took me to do it flew by.
Really?
It's gone. I just finished 6 laps. I'd done 2 pit stops. I'd come in, and then you coming down the slip road. Everyone's it's like, I'm a TT racer.
I did it.
I've achieved it, and that was it.
Right. So you didn't rock up to the TT start line. You didn't get there by chance. This is years in the making. So let's go all the way back. First point of getting on a motorcycle.
God, probably I think I was about 3.
Yeah.
3.5 years old. My older brother had a Honda QR50 and he wanted something slightly bigger. So I got handed a Honda QR50 and we went down on the little roads and car parks and little fields, all that sort of stuff. That's where we started. My dad and my gramps, massive bike fans, never racers, but massive bike fans. We watched all the MotoGP, we watched all the World Superbikes, we watched the TT. We did all that. I used to sit on the back of my dad's bike and we'd go down to Brands Hatch early in the morning. We did all that. Was what we did. We were massive bike fans, but never racers. And then after the little Honda, we went on a field that maybe we shouldn't have been on at the time, and we decided after we had a bit of an incident there with some people who may have been living on that piece of land, and we got little mini motos then, so that we could go around car parks, a bit more properly. Also, my one was a Craig Jones replica Triumph when he was on the yellow with the Union Jack Triumph. So that was my one. It was all signed by the team and everything on the rear seat. It was a great little blaster it was. And then when we sort of did that for a while, got into the indoor sort of mini moto riding in Northampton. Sort of did that, and then like Neil Mackenzie used to bring Taylor and Taryn down to the same place, so we were down there with them and Jamie Perrin, who's a super sport rider. We were all sort of there. Not no one was big or anything, but that's where we rode. And then it's like, outdoor riding's in the next bit. The bike we've got's not good enough for that. Let's get another one. And then all of a sudden this staircase appears in front of you to work your way up, and that was it. We went from doing mini motos to geared metric kits, and then up to super teens, then into the British GP 125s, then into stock 6, stock foul, and then I made the transition over to the roads, which was what I always wanted to do, but I felt with the roads you needed to be a certain level of maturity. Whether I've reached that point or not, I'm not 100% sure, but I felt like I could. So then I just had to try and find the avenues to go into roads, because the roads is a very different. It's the same scene, it's both bike racing, but the road scene and the race scene are kind of separate, especially at the sort of, where I was in sort of, mid-pack in stock foul. It was how do I go about doing that? It was never, I didn't have any people to show me the ropes. I had to sort of find it out. So I asked Rob Hodson, of all people. He was there at Donington doing a BSB wildcard. I was like, who do I need to speak to at the TT? That was the pinnacle. I wanted to do the TT. And he was like, email Paul Phillips.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Before we get to TT and emailing Paul Phillips, how was your dad involved in pushing you into racing? Was it all off your own back, or because he was a race fan, he wanted to kind of push you that way?
I was never pushed. I could always have the decisions of what I wanted to do. The aim of the game was, if I did well at school, I could run and ride my bikes.
Brilliant.
Outside if I want racing bikes, I was doing, push bikes down the street, playing around on my BMX, climbing around trees, just doing normal kids stuff.
Yeah.
But, I'm, without sounding stupid here, I'm relatively clever. I'm not too stupid.
I was warned before you came in. Yeah.
Try to say it with a straight face this time.
Yeah, and so the key was, focus on your schooling, give yourself your education, and as your reward for going up and through, we'll race motorbikes. And luckily, I have a really supportive family. So my brother, my sister, my mum and my dad, my grandparents, everyone was always with racing bikes. And at the start, me and my brother were both racing bikes. He's about 4.5 years older than me, so point went up to big track racing, as we'd call it. He sort of dialed it out, whereas I continued on up into super teens and stuff.
And from those mini moto days, was it always your mindset to keep climbing? You wanted to end up on short circuit and obviously progress to road racing.
So yeah, I always wanted to work my way up to the top. Obviously, like any 7-8-year-old who's into bikes, I wanted to be MotoGP world champion.
Yeah, of course.
Standard. I still do.
That's what I wanted to be. But as I was, working my way up, the TT was becoming more and more prominent in my sort of field. The road racing I was watching, Close to the Edge came out. All this stuff was coming out, and I was able to watch it more. We never had the Duke videos and that at home stored away. We weren't it just wasn't where we were. It was, recorded on the Skybox. So the TT became more and more into my field at that point, but I was still like, I'm not sure I'm ready. I was 18, I was racing Stock 6, I was starting to get to the front of Stock 6, getting on the podium. I was like, yeah, I want to do TT, but not yet. It's got to be the right point, I think, in your life to go and do the TT, because you're putting a lot at risk and on the line, but it's the TT. It's got to be worth it, and I've now found out it's so worth it. But I needed to make sure that I wasn't going to go and just go balls to the wall, because that was my problem in short circuit.
What about Dad? Obviously he'd been fully behind you. Obviously from the small bikes in the car parks, in the flipping fields, car parks, and so on. When the TT was first spoken about at home, was he proactive with it or a little bit negative?
He wasn't too bad. It was my mum who was the most against it. Mm-hmm. I say against it. She was trying to warn me not to do it. She doesn't want me to risk that much more. But at the end of the day, my parents will, and they'll always say it, they'll support us no matter what we're going to do. And I also said to them, if you don't let me, I'm going to go and do it anyway.
Yeah, you may as well support us.
I'm big enough and ugly enough now to go and do this on my own. I don't know how I would have had to beg, borrowed and steal even more than we currently do. but I would have done it, even if it had been rocking up to the Manx on a 650, like a mini twin or something that I could have got for £4,000 and had to run it myself. I wanted to go and achieve it. I wanted to go and do it and have a go at it. So they were both on board. My grandparents were on board. They bought me my outright helmet for the TT. They were like, right, we want to give you the best helmet we can get. So they went and got me that. Everyone's been super involved and as supportive as they can be, without putting the feelings that they don't want you to aside, because it is unfair on them. It's a very selfish thing that we do. I get the enjoyment out of it, you got the enjoyment out of it when you did it. Your family doesn't.
They get the nerves.
They get the panic of not knowing what's going on while you're 17 miles away.
Yeah.
Doing 180 mile an hour. They don't have a clue.
Don't make it worse for them, because they're going to be listening to this.
It's completely safe, Mum, if you're listening. There's no issue at all.
But it's a strange mindset for an 18, 19-year-old. You don't often get that. Like you say, as a 7-year-old, you wanted to be a MotoGP champion. But then 18, 19, you start going, oh, TT. And that's not normally how it goes when you listen to a lot of riders' stories.
Yeah, some people always want to do it from the start. Some people fall into it at the end, or it's like do you want to do it? But my bit was, I'd watched it and I'd seen it and I was like, I want to do it. But I care about life as well. So it had to be the right point to know that I could get round, that I could get my free finishes from my free starts. That was the bit. That's what I wanted. Didn't want to just turn up and go guns out thinking I'm going to be the Billy Big Bollocks and I'm going to be at the front and set the newcomer lap record. I wasn't bothered about that. I was bothered about learning. It's a 3 to 5 year deal, this TT thing, to be at the front, unless you're Mr. Plater over here.
So once that was in your mind to complete the TT, what was your mindset then, and what was your process of starting to learn before going over?
Well, so I went So I race some sidecars in my spare time. I'm a bit of a passenger, and I was a passenger in 18 and 19 for John Shipley Jr. Now his John Shipley Sr. races sidecars. So in 2019, Shipley Jr. said to me, he was like, "Do you fancy coming over and watching the TT?" At this point, it's in my head, I'd want to do it, but I was a bit, there's one part on my shoulder going, "You want to do the TT?" And then the sensible one's going, "It's a bit dangerous. Though. Are you really ready?"
Yeah.
And so I went over, and we got there. It was a bad year 19 for practice a week at the start. It was all rain and that. And we ended up there getting there midweek. And that was the first night of practice in the end. So we were just on the exit of Union Mills, I think, outside opposite the petrol station.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the Shipley brothers happens to have a house there. So we were in his front garden. We sat down. They're like, "You're going to hate this," and you're going to go, "You don't want to do this anymore." When you see him coming through. Sat there and I got my phone up and I've recorded it. And in comes Dean Harrison through Union Mills, drops in sideways all the way out to the gutter, rocks and crap all being flicked up behind him, sideways, and off he buggers off. And then I was in love.
That was it.
And that was it. That was it. Just straight up I was like, "Yeah, I've got to do this."
I'm having some of that.
It's just you don't see that on short circuit, and you can't be within 2 meters of him.
Yeah.
I was in someone's garden.
Mm-hmm.
So there's we were on a sort of concrete brick wall, footpath, Dean Harrison chucking rocks at us.
Yeah.
And that was it, laying a big flat black line on a road that was perfectly, clean, as in on the road, cars going over it.
Yeah.
So no tracks on marked out there. And that was it. I was like, right.
Where do I
Yeah,
sign
I
up?
need myself a bit of that. But then COVID hit.
So you plan to come after that?
Well, the plan was right. So 19, I was like, right, I've got to do this now.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't got a date set in my head. Then COVID hit, and I took 2020 out. I didn't race anything in 2020. 2021 came back in, and I went back into stock foul. And something was missing. The short circuits weren't giving me the same thrill and buzz that I'd had before.
Mm.
And it wasn't till sort of towards the end of the year that I said to my dad, "I want to go road racing, and I think I'll do the TT in 23, and for 22 we'll go and do, Cookstown, Tandragee, Armoy, sort of, that sort of road racing, a bit more scratchy, and then we'll go for the TT in 23. So at that point I asked Rob, who do I need to speak to, and he said, talk to Paul. And I sent Paul an email and said, "Look, I'd want to come over in 2023. This is what I've done. This is my sort of CV. What do I need to do to achieve that?" And at that point, they had just starting up the virtual bike
Yeah.
thing. Have you had a go on it?
No, I haven't. No.
Try and get yourself a go. It's a right laugh.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, why don't you come and have a go on that and see what you know?" I've been playing the TT game since I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Got all the latest ones, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll go and have a go on that." I'm sort of pretty good at video games. Seems like a big video game. And I came up to Preston, where that is, jumped on, and Barty was there. And he was like, "Right, you're going to be the first person to have a go on this. So just, there's a master one that Barty sets. You then ride around, throttle, brake, turn, and you then get compared to the master lap. See how close you are?" And he's like, "Right, so we're looking for people. We're going to say people know how the track is, or know where they're going. If they get over 75%, and you do it on a bigger bike, which I think is Barty's 2011 or 2012 lap, and you do it on a super twin lap, which is on one of the patterns, and then you combine both your scores together to give you an overall percentage of how well you know the course."
Mm-hmm.
And I think I scored about 86%.
Oh, nice! And this is all from not going over there, learning the course. This is
And I hadn't
solely
done any
from
learning. Yeah, this was
game.
November 21. So it was quite late at this point. And
No, sorry, Milo. November 2021.
yeah, and I did it in.
So you've not been over there and done any laps?
No, done nothing.
Wow.
It's purely all the knowledge that came from the games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
come from the games and watching the onboards and just being a TT fan.
Yeah.
A fan, yeah.
That just a TT fan, and I'm quite good at revision and that sort of thing. So But my thought was, if I'm playing the game anyway, when the TT time does come, I'm going to know it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was sort of November 21, I think. Might even been December. Somewhere along there. One of them got snowed off or winded off because Barty couldn't get over here because of the weather. So it was one of those times. And then, at that point, Barty said to me, he was like, why aren't you doing it next year? You clearly know what you're doing. Why aren't you doing it in 22? I was like, well, I don't have a team. I don't really know who to speak to. My plan was 2023. Go and try and prove myself a little bit on the road so I was a safe, fast rider. And then hopefully I can squeeze my way into someone's sort of back of their awning with my little. I've got an R6, a 13S R6 at home. So and then I can go and do it that way, even if it's going through the Manx or whatever. That'll be fine. And but he was like, all right, let me go and make some phone calls. So then I think sort of January time, middle of Jan, got a phone call from Barty. I've got you a team for this year. What do you think? Well, yes. Obviously, yes. This is the greatest call ever. I was bouncing around the house like no tomorrow.
And at this point, had you been for a lap around in a car or anything? Is it still...
Other than when I went over in 2019.
Yeah.
That was the only time. Yeah. So he was like, why don't you come over here and meet the team? And if you get on and you both want to do it, we can sort it out.
Yeah.
So I jumped on the phone, booked a plane ticket. The following weekend, went over and met Mick Sharnock at TC Racing, DP Coldplaning. And got on, from my point of view, you might say something different, but from my point of view, like a house on fire. He might say he's a right tosser, but that's not...
Funnily enough, he did get in touch with him. He did say that.
Yeah,
he did say that.
No, he would. But the whole guys, they were absolutely fantastic. And so I met them and we sort of said, yeah, right, we'll do it. And, I got a rental car and sort of did 5-6 laps. And each day that I was there for a long weekend. And met up with Milky and Barty, and they, take you for your laps as well. Really,
was that an eye opener?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. All of a sudden, if I fell off on the video game, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is really going to hurt. There is actually a big wall just there. Oh, that's the whole
Made
track.
of bricks. Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Barty and Milky are so knowledgeable, and they have a fantastic way of passing that knowledge back onto us newcomers to be like, this is what you do. And I think the first time, I don't think Milky was 100% sure that I could do it. So it wasn't until the next time that I came over, and obviously as I went over, I took a notepad, had each corner cut out into a separate page of the book, or any notable corners, and I was jotting stuff down and recording bits and pieces, so that I finished it up in the hotel room that night, went back home, studied that, played more of the game, watched more videos. At this point, I was now, every evening, 2-3 hours on the game, watch a video, go into the toilet, YouTube up, poos became 17 minutes long. Because that was you've got 17 minutes apiece.
Full of it.
Yeah. Sometimes it'd be longer, but I would do 2 laps in if it was a bad day, bad night. But that was just take every opportunity that you can. And the other bit was I was still living at home with my parents at that point. Mum come in, why haven't you done this? Oh, well, I'm saving my life at the moment by playing the TT game.
Nice one.
The more I do, the more I learn, the safer I am. But it was a great learning experience. And then came back the second time, and Milky then asked you the question. He asked you the questions for you to give him the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to be able to go back to him and tell him what he wanted to hear. At that point, I was like, he sort of then gave me more the vibes of, yeah, you are, you can do this, you are capable. So I think I went over 4 times in total. One time I took my own bike, my road bike over, and rode around on my own bike for a few laps. And, the missus came along, and so she could see it all, and, she's been really supportive through it all. Not going, it's too dangerous. She was there going for me, so that was fantastic. And then, that was it then. We went over at the end of May.
So just going back to that learning process, obviously you jump on that virtual bike and, you pass the test with flying colours, and Barty's like, let's do it now. That must fill you with confidence. But then when you go out there and you've got Milky saying, Was it at that point, do you think, maybe I'm not ready? Or do you just go, I need to study harder?
It was I need to study harder.
Right.
It's, it's like failing a maths test at uni. You failed it. It was like,
It
right.
didn't put you off thinking you weren't ready, no?
No, because in my head, it sounds stupid saying it now. I'm like, 3 months was a long time. It's really not.
No.
But at the time, I was like, I've got 3 months. Typical sort of 24-year-old, like, heavy, right? Okay, I'll sort it out. And that's what I did. I just, went to work, got home from work, TT, went to bed. That was it.
So give us an example of those questions that Milky would ask a newcomer when they're learning it.
So it'd be a silly thing. Well, I say silly things. So as you come out of Balacry, up over the jump, you've got, as you're heading down to Quarry Bends, you've got the 3 bits that stick out of the wall. And it's going, right, how many are there? So that if you say 2, then you're going to, count the first 2 and then not realise there's another one, you're going to...
So what are those bits in the wall?
The sort of rocks or just the hedgerow sticks out. I don't know.
Right.
Just the banking sort of sticks out at you at those points.
Right.
So it's counting all 3 of those because they sort of, as you're looking down the road, you don't really notice them until you're sort of on them. Mm-hmm. So if you move too close to them, you could easily clip them. Or it's like Crosby staying to the right, Balacry staying to the right, Glen Helen when you tip in. Just all little bits like that he's going, right, where do you turn in here? Which corners? Is this a late apex or an early apex? And most of the time it's a late apex. But there's a couple of points where they are early and it's like, he's asking you, is this one late? You're like, yeah, it's late. No, this one's an early. Over the mountain, how are you? Where do you... what looks like a perfectly straight piece of road when you're doing 30 mile an hour suddenly becomes quite a large kink at 170 mile an hour. And it's that sort of stuff that he really tests you on to know that when you come to that point that you're not gonna
fail.
Yeah, you're not gonna make a mistake. And knowing what corners up next, the end of Selby Straight, you need to know you've got Selby Bridge. If you forget that that's there, you're gonna have a big problem.
Yeah.
So fast forward on. Obviously, we've gone through what Chris spoke about at the start with the touch on the shoulder and away you go and you're going down, bro. I'm talking about not first race, but practice. You're away. What through the practicing of TT Fortnight was the toughest sections to learn, to get it one with?
I still wouldn't
so that's not saying you're perfect now.
I say I'm still not one with.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're perfect now, but what was the toughest? Because I had them. Everybody has them.
I struggled a lot with the veranda up on the mountain. Really struggled. I probably still struggle with that now. I'm not anywhere near as fast as you can go through there. Same as sort of top of the Big Arrow, through that little section, coming up to that and through the top and bottom Big Arrow through to the 13th milestone. I'm using barely any of the road there. I'm sort of sitting in the middle. I'm hitting the top bottom of the Big Arrow where I need to, but at the going in when you've got some fast corners going in and like coming up the 11th milestone up to that point, all of that I've got 3 or 4 foot to the curb because I've just not got the confidence yet to power it through those corners like you need to use all the track, because the track you can use there, it's completely fine to.
11th is difficult, to use because it goes very negative, and I didn't like that because you always felt like you wanted to use more, but you can't.
If it's coming out there, I'm probably right in the middle on the white line. Like there's still 2-3 foot where just carry a bit more power through. Same as the top of the Garrow, I'm slowing up too much to go in. Bottom of the Garrow, I'm really not confident with that. I'm not a big sort of the compressions are probably my most hated part on Bray Hill. Bottom of the Garrow, that. I'm not a fan of it. It's so uncomfortable. I feel terrible for the bike, terrible for myself. It shouldn't be going through this, but here we are, we're going through. 13th milestone I found really difficult. Really, so, you're going in, you're hitting the brakes, and you're like, I still don't know where I need to tip in. So then I ended up scrubbing off all my speed, tipping in, and then it being like wide open. So as I was coming in, it's just like, every time, like, you silly sausage. But what are you doing?
Do you remember that? Because you've got another 37 miles to go before you get to that point.
Yeah, every time you get back then, you're like, right, I got it wrong last time, let's do it again. Let's get it right this time. Oh, no, I got it wrong again. Now I've got to do a pit stop first, then I can come back and do it again.
That's why it takes 3 to 5 years to eventually learn the circuit.
I probably had one of the best years going. I think I did about 34, 35 laps this year.
Blooming hell.
Which is mental. We had great weather for it. We managed to run all the races albeit at maybe slightly different points, but we managed to run it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did an awful lot of laps. So it's not often you get as a good newcomer year as what I got this year. I should have done better than what I did, but
We will we'll talk about race week, we'll talk about your future, and we'll talk about you featuring in the new TT docu-series that'll be coming out soon as well. Right, join us for part 2 next week.